Fly chick coming through. Nice to meet you. Glad you came too. Like you said, when you know you got moves. You spit game and you know you spit.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Fastlane Collective. I am your host, Brianna, and we have our other co-host here, Daniella. She's back from her big Berlin E-Prix weekend. How are you doing? How was Berlin?
It was amazing. I had such a great time. I think I just thrive being at a racetrack. It was incredible. I got to produce my first sit-down interview, which was actually a kind of a big deal because it was of Lucas di Grassi and it was him announcing his retirement from Formula E, which was kind of crazy and actually quite fitting for what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. But yes, it felt like there was a bit of pressure. I was like, oh my goodness, not only is this my first one, but it's breaking news, and also it's with the veteran of Formula E. If you think of Formula E, you think of Lucas di Grassi. The two come together, so it's gonna be very weird next season not having him as on the grid. So that was great fun, and then I was in the pit lane with Alexa Rendell, who's our pit lane reporter, and I was genuinely having the best time ever. I just think that being at a racetrack is where I'm meant to be. It feels like home, and I loved it so much. But I've now had to switch off that mindset and go straight into Monaco. It is Monaco E-Prix weekend for Formula E, so everything is kind of go at the moment. And then as soon as that's done, I'm moving on to F1 for Canada. So everything's happening all at once, but it is super exciting. Brianna, how are you?
I'm doing good. Oh man, it's so cool to hear about your FE weekends and just it makes me so happy for you. I love to hear you talk about it and see you just light up. And you're 100% right. Your place is at the racetrack. You're, even when you're not working, somehow you find yourself at a racetrack, even if it's for fun. So yeah, I love how you're I think the racetrack is no, we know the racetrack is where you're supposed to be.
Everybody just knows this about me. If you can't find me, probably at a racetrack.
Yeah, she's probably at Silverstone if you're looking for her, and she's not in the office. That's where she is.
That's very true. Silverstone specifically, if you genuinely cannot find me, 9 out of 10 times that's probably where I am.
It's probably true. It's probably true. She's their unspoken resident. But yeah, no, I had a great weekend. Again, the weather's getting nice here, so enjoying all the sun, all the fresh air. I live right by the ocean, so I just love, there's nothing better than strolling to the coffee shop in the morning, getting a coffee, and then sitting by the water and just enjoying the waves and the wind. It's so calming. I love it so much this time of year. And when it gets warm around here in Boston, I stay. I don't go anywhere. I usually don't go on any summer vacations because basically where I live, I'm very lucky. It's like a vacation. And I want to enjoy the nice weather because, man, when it gets cold around here, we don't leave. That's when I go on vacation. Literally, we plan our vacations in the wintertime because it's so snowy and cold and windy here. So yeah, soaking in all the sun. My skin needs it too. For those of us watching, I'm very pale at the moment. I need some sun. Your girl needs some sun. So yeah, enjoying the weather for sure around here. Really quick, guys, I want to talk about our sponsor, which I'm so proud to be the owner of, which is Grand Prix Girl. If you didn't know, Grand Prix Girl really started with a simple frustration. It's me and my mom. We've loved F1 for so long, but we couldn't find merchandise made for women, which kind of blew our minds, seeing that women make up now over 43% of the F1 fan base. So we decided to make our own. Yes, that's right. We went into business together and we started making our own F1 merch. The brand is called Grand Prix Girl. Grand Prix Girl offers jewelry in race day style designs exclusively for female F1 fans. We keep you guys top of mind every time we are designing something, and our brand is truly all around female Formula One and motorsports fans. You can shop our best-selling products like our paddock pendant and even our new double stack bracelets that just came out at grandprixgirl.com. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok as well at Grand Prix Girl, and we hope you come join us over in our community. We are really proud to sponsor this podcast, and we are so proud and honored to bring you merch made for female fans. So again, go check us out at grandprixgirl.com, and back to the podcast. But we're really excited to get into today's episode kind of how the topic of this episode came about was due to a big rumor that you may or may not have heard over the past couple of days during this F1 break. And we were like, you know what? This is something we should talk about. Not just the rumor, but the bigger conversation around it. So we're going to jump right into things. No news this weekend. But if you haven't heard, there are rumors have been rushing around the F1 world, social media, news outlets all over the place that Lewis Hamilton is supposedly going to retire at the end of this year and making this announcement possibly at Silverstone race this year. Now, when I saw this, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This seemed a little bit more out of the blue than other retirement rumors that we've heard about Lewis Hamilton. A lot of those rumors have come around when he's just, his last couple years at Mercedes weren't going well. It was more speculation and kind of more like, you know what, this feels like the right time to maybe retire. But this one seemed to come out of nowhere, so much out of nowhere that Daniela didn't even know about it. And that was my first red flag that maybe this rumor was really, truly a rumor, because Daniela's got the inside scoop on all the motorsports world. And when I know about it before she does, not a good sign that it has any truth to it. So what did you think, Daniela, when I quick messaged you and I was like, have you seen this? Do you know anything? And you were like, no. And I sent you like all the receipts from where I saw it. What were your thoughts?
Definitely thought it was fake. Just because usually like I do hear about things before they happen, and often I cannot talk about them or let you know in advance. So then I know, boo, sad. So I genuinely hadn't heard this like at all. Like had no inkling that this was gonna happen. So I was a little bit like, okay, I don't know if I fully believe it. Like, the first question I asked Brianna was, where did you hear this? Just because I have, over the last, like, 5-6 years, definitely fallen for fake news.
Oh, who hasn't? Who hasn't? Those F1 breaking news templates that everyone seems to steal, they get me every time. Maybe only for a couple of seconds, but they get me every time.
See, I have like fallen for them really hard, like send them to my friends. Like one that's like sticks out in my brain is like, I want to say around 2022, it was like someone put out that Mick Schumacher was moving to Alpine. And I remember I sent that to all of my friends and then realized that it was fake and then sent a reaction shot of me realizing that it was fake to all of my friends. So I've definitely fallen for them multiple times, and I didn't want that to happen this time. I was like, no, I now know through my job how to look at sources and see what is reliable and what's not.
True.
Now, Brianna did send some like news outlets, which usually are quite reliable, but also at the same time, like, where did they get it from? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, Brianna sent over all of her receipts, and I just wanted to check that they were legitimate before kind of deeping in this a little bit too much. And to be fair, like some of the people that like some of the videos you sent were from like quite reliable people, but then that made me question where did they get this information from, because it hadn't been like officially reported by like the BBC or Sky Sports and like your usual outlets.
Right.
So I wanted to just like check. Now, the only thing that's making me think like, oh, maybe this does have some legs is like it being quite specific about it be like, having to be announced at Silverstone whether or not Lewis is going to retire. Like that he has to almost come to a decision by Silverstone. And that makes you question like, why Silverstone? Is it because it's his own Grand Prix? But if he wasn't retiring, why did he then also have to like announce that he's not retiring by the British Grand Prix? Which I'm like, so does that mean he's retiring then if he has to make some sort of an announcement? But also, is it just this rumor that's going around because people are bored because we've got a little bit of a break? So there's a lot of like pros and cons as to why this could be legit and why it can't be. Right now I'm leaning towards it's probably not. But we will come on to this later, but there has been someone in the media that has said something that's made me then also be like, well, you said stuff, but then does that have legs? So it's a lot of like second guessing, I feel like, especially in the F1 world. There's constant rumors that you never know what's true and what's not. But I think this one just came at a time when people weren't expecting it, that then everyone I think has gone, oh my god, it must be true. Are you feeling the same way, Brianna?
I think the reason that I thought this might have a bit of reality to it, I guess you could say, was it just came out of absolutely nowhere, which seems strange. Like I said, in the past, when Lewis Hamilton has had rumors around his retirement, there's been like quote unquote reasons as to why it would make sense. Like, oh, things are going really bad, or oh, Mercedes isn't doing well, or oh, you seem miserable. Maybe this is the right time to kind of like, say you're done with it. So the fact that it came out of absolutely nowhere, I was kind of like, huh, okay, that's odd. Like, what prompted this to even be a discussion point? And that's when you and me kind of started digging in and looking into where did this originate? Is Lewis Hamilton actually going to retire at the end of 2026? Is the real question we were asking. And once we kind of looked into this, and you specifically, Daniela, got a great resource, we kind of found out that this all kind of started around some comments that Ralf Schumacher made to the German media, just kind of saying and suggesting that some of these older drivers, and he specifically said Lewis Hamilton, should kind of, take off the helmet and hang it up for opportunity for some of these younger drivers to kind of have a chance in the sport. So to be blunt, there is no confirmation from anybody that Lewis is planning on retiring. It seems like this rumor has started from this specific interview with Ralf Schumacher. Daniela, were you able to discover anything more that might give some legitimacy to this rumor?
From what I found, it's more that Ralf Schumacher said to Sky Sports Germany that he thinks that some of these drivers, such as, and he did specifically name Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, that they should now kind of take that step back, allow younger drivers to come in, because they're the reason that we aren't getting like 22-year-olds on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying that, that Ferrari have already chosen the replacement for Lewis Hamilton, and that is going to be Ollie Behrman. It's kind of leaning towards the fact that Lewis is going to retire at the end of this season. Ferrari have already got a backup plan. That's going to be Ollie. So we just have to take this as it is. Goodbye, Lewis. Hello, Ollie. And go from there, which I don't know if that's necessarily true. Obviously, this is coming from Ralf Schumacher, who in the past has said things that haven't been true. I just want to preface this. He's done this multiple times.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think he has an opinion, he takes it, but the way he then speaks it's as if it's fact, and it's not. So
Yeah.
this is another one of those moments of he isn't coming out and saying, Lewis Hamilton is retiring, Ollie Behrman's replacing him. He's saying, this is what I think should happen. Lewis should retire. Ollie should take that seat. That then opens up a seat at Haas for a younger generation. And Brenna, we've had conversations lots in the past about when should drivers retire, when should we then be given the space for rookies to come in. I know that I used to be such a big advocate for rookies. I really wanted them in the space, but also I can appreciate that there are people in this sport who have been in this sport for a really long time who have made it to what it is now, and having them having to leave to allow new talent to come in is difficult to navigate as a fan, because you can really appreciate and admire what this person has done and achieved in their career, but also know that like sometimes good things must come to an end, and we need to have space for new people to come in for the sport to continue to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned too, something that kind of piqued your interest about this rumor was the very specific nature of the timing, the whole Silverstone deadline. Obviously, it would make sense for him to make an announcement at his home race. That would make sense kind of in all of our F1 brains. But do you think that there's maybe any legitimacy or some kind of decision that definitely needs to be made behind the scenes for Lewis by Silverstone? Or do you think that was just something Ralph just threw out there into the F1 universe?
Sometimes there are deadlines when it comes to drivers' contracts, when teams can announce when drivers are going to be either departing or joining their team. So I think that it's not abnormal to see this, but I feel like in this sense, I'm confused, because if Lewis decides not to retire, does he have to make a big announcement at Silverstone that he's not retiring?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that makes me question, well, maybe then he is retiring if he has to make this announcement at Silverstone. because it just feels weird to say to everyone, "Oh, hey guys, I'm not retiring." Like, and why by Silverstone does he have to decide to retire? Is that because they want to announce that Ollie's joining Ferrari at his home Grand Prix as well? Like
Mm.
I remember when he was announced that he was going to Haas, and that was the weekend of the British Grand Prix. So is that what Ferrari are thinking about? Like, all eyes are going to be on us. Like, Lewis is announcing he's retiring. We're going to announce that Ollie's coming in. There's all of these questions and like so much uncertainty. And so I think that if it was for Ollie's sake, I think it makes sense that they're going to have this deadline. But
Right.
if it's just that Lewis is retiring, unless it's a personal deadline for him where he's like, right, I want to announce at Silverstone that I'm retiring, then I feel like that makes sense. But if it's he has to have a decision by then, I feel like that doesn't really.
Yeah, and also Daniela, like just looking kind of back at Lewis's career, he's never really been one to wait for certain sentimental dates to announce things. Thinking back to when he made his most recent big announcement, which was moving to Ferrari, it was at a completely random time, a time that making an announcement that you're moving to another team at the beginning of your last season with your team made absolutely no sense. I remember us talking about, it's kind of a weird time to make that announcement. Now you've got to sit with that team for the whole year and be like, well, nice knowing all of you.
But I think that's because Lewis didn't actually have control over that situation. I think that was announced, like leaked into the media rather than him being like, I'm leaving. And then I think they knew that it was going to be leaked out, so he had to just do it like there and then. Where I feel like maybe with this is his way of like claiming it as his own and being like, right, I'm in control of the situation of when this is coming out into the media. Obviously, it's already kind of been leaked, but it's not confirmed. Where before, it was more like, okay, yeah, Lewis is definitely going to Ferrari. We've not got any confirmation that Lewis is definitely retiring. He still
True.
might not. So it's one of those things of like, is he just trying to reclaim this for himself? Because the last time he had a big announcement, he actually had no control over the situation.
Yeah. Besides the specificity of the timing and this whole Silverstone, end by date, that's the only thing that got me, and the timing of when this came about, just out of the blue and random, made me kind of question like, maybe this could have some legitimacy to it. But then I wanted to go back and look at, what was Lewis's mood at the beginning of the season? What was he saying about retirement in the beginning of this season? Because obviously that has been a question that's been lobbed to him multiple times in the past several years because he's no spring chicken anymore. And ever since I think he lost that 8th world championship, the question of retirement has always been on the table. But I looked back and at an interview at the beginning of this season with Yahoo Sports, he said, I don't want to leave the sport without having a Grand Prix in Africa. So he was pretty much saying, and not just specifically to that, he was kind of saying like, I don't have any plans anytime soon to retire from this sport. I feel good about this season. He was even saying how the off season did him such justice, what he needed to kind of refresh. And he also mentioned like he doesn't want to leave Formula One until Africa is back on the F1 calendar, which the last African Grand Prix was in South Africa in 1993. So Lewis could be here for a while, guys, because apparently, according to him, he's not leaving until F1 is back in Africa. So the fact that he was so like stern, there was no wishy-washiness around this at the beginning of the season, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there might be some legitimacy to like some decision around his contract being needed to be made by Silverstone, and maybe that's kind of where this kind of really started to gain some traction, besides Ralph just being Ralph. And I feel like sometimes as well, like you said, he's said some things over the years that have not been true. And I think it's just because he's Ralph Schumacher, like people are like, oh, he said it. Like, so there must be some legitimacy around it, which obviously we know is not true. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what comes of this, if anything. And like you mentioned, Danielle, too, maybe people are just bored. It's completely possible. There hasn't been a ton of F1 news since Miami. So, as we know, news outlets need things to talk about. So we will see. But this whole rumor shenanigans this week about Lewis Hamilton retiring really started us thinking, when is it time for F1 drivers to hang up the helmet and call it a day, a job well done, and ride off into the sunset into their next portion of life? I think this is a question that has obviously been flying around with Lewis Hamilton's career, Fernando Alonso as well, as he's still on the grid. I think back to a couple of years ago when Kimi Raikkonen was still in Formula One. This question was also a big question mark. And it really got us thinking about when's it time? When should F1 drivers retire? And credit to Ralf Schumacher, when is it time for these guys to hang it up to make way for that younger talent? Like you've mentioned, we've discussed multiple times on this podcast about younger talent being needed to be given the opportunity in Formula One, so they're not just sitting on the sidelines and their talent is completely going unused. So, Daniela, my question for you is, like, at what point does a veteran driver go from being an asset to a team to kind of a seat filler on a team? I think that's kind of where a lot of this retirement question starts to come up for a lot of drivers, is when that we see this kind of shift from going from an asset to a seat filler.
That's a very interesting question. And I think my response is when the second driver, so I guess the less experienced driver, is then outperforming by a large margin as well, the driver that's in that current, the veteran driver. I think that's when we can really see, like, okay, this driver's not performing in the way that he has been previously, and is capable of. Maybe it is time that we think about bringing in younger talent. I feel like we've seen it all the time in F1 and across multiple motorsport championships, where that driver who is known for being, like, in his absolute prime, is doing incredible things, and then as he's getting older, he either switches teams or stays the same team, and then you get a new rookie coming in, and this rookie is like beacon of light and is shining across everyone, and everyone's looking at him and is forgetting about that veteran driver that's next to him. And I think that's when, and I'm saying the words him here because we currently only have males in F1 at the moment, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm being misogynistic. I'm just using F1 as an example here. So that's when I feel like we need to have a look at, like, could this driver maybe take a step back and we then get in someone else who is young and fresh and is maybe going to push that team to the limit that it needs to be at.
Yeah, I think a prime example of what you just spoke to right there is Daniel Ricciardo. I hate to use him as an example for this, but I just go back to thinking about when Max and Daniel were teammates, and Max was outperforming Daniel by quite a bit, and Daniel was feeling that shift in the team toward backing Max more than Daniel. And we saw it as his career went on, just hopping from team to team and being outperformed by rookies almost at every turn, unfortunately. And we saw Daniel Ricciardo struggle really with the idea of retirement, and if it was time, if maybe it was the right time for him. I think something you see not just with Formula One drivers, but with athletes who are getting older and, I guess you could say, out of their prime, they do struggle with this idea and thought of retirement. Obviously, leaving basically your full-time job for this sake of this example, and thinking of retiring for anybody can sometimes be a scary thing. A lot of us put a lot of our heart and soul into what we do on a daily basis, and these drivers and athletes definitely do that. Definitely more so than us at our 9-to-5s. Their whole lives on and off track are revolving around their day job. So the thought of letting that go and not having it as human beings can be very scary, especially for drivers that haven't allowed other things into their lives because of the sport. And I think drivers sometimes just have a hard time letting go of the fact that they're past their prime. I think with Daniel Ricciardo, again, like that's what we were seeing. We were seeing the struggle of him coming to terms with the fact that he wasn't as good as he used to be, which is a really hard thing to watch as a fan, honestly. Like the amount of times I saw Daniel Ricciardo distressed it just ripped my soul out every time. I don't know about you.
Yes. I have always been such a big Daniel Ricciardo fan, and dealing with him leaving and coming back and retiring was actually painful, because without Daniel Ricciardo, I wouldn't be working in the sport. So I found it hard when he retired. But he then went on to say that, and I think this is something that we really need to consider within this conversation, that he didn't have to make the decision to retire. The sport made that decision for him, and he actually found that if the sport hadn't have done it, he would have made it would have been a lot harder for him to have come to that decision. So almost taking that away from him has benefited him, because it has meant that he didn't have to be the one to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
The decision was made for him. And I wonder if maybe if more drivers were having given the decision made for them, would they be in F1 for as long as they have been? Especially those who have been outperformed by their teammates in a similar way to Daniel was.
Yeah. So this is going to lead me actually into my next question, Daniela, is do you think there would ever be a need to put a age cap on how old you can be to be a Formula One driver in F1 to kind of prevent some of these drivers from basically not being able to let go and, like you mentioned, having the sport make the decision for him?
I find this topic really interesting, because my mind immediately goes to the fact that we actually have like an age restriction on when drivers can enter Formula One, and that you have to be 18 years of age. So I'm like, so then should we have a cap at the other end? So then that makes it fair and equal. But then what if we were to say, I don't know, I'll use Alonso as an example, right? Say Alonso's the oldest driver on the grid. What if he was then in contention for the title, right? He's challenging it. He's looking like he could win a world championship, and you turn around and say, sorry, you're now too old to race in Formula One. Like, that just feels really backwards, no? Like, what if Lewis ends up being in contention for the title this season, and then all of a sudden they bring in this rule where, like, you're his age. Okay, no, you can't race in Formula One anymore. And he's like, but I could get my 8th world title right now, and you're telling me no? So I can see it from both sides. Like, to an extent, I feel like maybe it could help this problem of like having drivers be in the sport for maybe a little bit too long and allowing fresh talent to come in. But also at the same time, if you're in contention for that title and like you're almost kind of like, I don't know, a second wave of being in your prime, and then you're told, oh no, you actually can't compete anymore. Like, that's gonna be a bit strange. And would they also say, if like, I don't know, I'm just gonna use 45 as the age limit here as an example. Say if a driver is 44, they're in their final season. What if like halfway through the season they turn 45? Do they have to leave as soon as they're 45? Or do they have to leave, can they leave at the end of that season? But then what if they're like, what if someone's birthday, right, that it's March, right, they start off the season 44, by the end of the first month they're 45, and then technically they can do the whole entire season as a 45-year-old. What's the limit here? Like, how are we gonna like warrant this? So I find it a really interesting conversation, because I am someone who very much wants to get as much young talent in as possible, but I also highly respect those that have been a part of what the sport is now. Like, Lewis is a 7-time world champion. He has made the sport to what it is today, and I don't really want him to leave, but at the same time I know that there's people waiting in those wings who are very eager to get out there and aren't getting the opportunities because the seats are filled by older drivers. Or it brings me on to my next point, pay drivers. I said to Brianna before we started recording, I don't feel like we can have this conversation without mentioning pay drivers within this, because yes, part of the problem is having these drivers who are in their 40s taking up seats that a 20-year-old could have. But another thing is we also have drivers who maybe haven't fully, and I want to like preface it in the nicest way possible, haven't fully deserved to be there. Whether that is through their dad owning the team or them paying their way in. I think this is a topic of conversation that kind of all interlinks together, and we can't really speak about one without the other. Brianna, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that actually maybe we're looking at this completely wrong? It's not this whole age thing that we need to be worrying about. It's actually pay drivers that we need to be concerned about.
Yeah, I think in that same breath, it's not necessarily like age that we have to worry about, like you said, but performance is what we need to worry about. Does performance justify your longevity in the sport? And normally you would think, well, yeah, of course, that's naturally going to happen. If you're really good at this, you're probably going to stay because people are going to want you. And if you're bad, you're going to leave. And that's where the paid driver question comes in, because we have seen, I'm just going to come out and say it, Lance Stroll. He's been in this sport for forever. And he has yet to prove why he's still there. It's really astonishing to me. We've seen paid drivers come and go in Formula One. I mean, look at Logan Sargent, for example. Yes, he did kind of earn his way in, but he didn't earn his stay, for sure. And you could argue he was a paid driver. His family comes from a very wealthy background, a kid of means. And of course, like, a lot of people were rooting for him because he was going to be the first American in a very long time to ever be on the racetrack in Formula One. So you could argue there was a bit of bias and definitely a lot of money flying around to get him to where he needed to be. But at the end, he couldn't perform and he got the boot. You can even look at Mick Schumacher as a great example of this. Like, maybe not a paid, but, you know, not necessarily there 100%, but because of money, but more also because of maybe his name. Let's be real. Everybody wanted to see Michael Schumacher's son drive a Formula One car and possibly win it, but he couldn't stick it out either. And same with Nicholas Latifi. He was 1000% a paid driver, and he stuck around probably for longer than he should have, due to money. But I mean, Lance Stroll is the biggest example of this paid driver issue. And I mean, how could we forget about Nikita Mazepin? Another classic example of a paid driver. And that's where that whole, okay, is it not age? Is it performance? You have to meet certain performance to get into Formula One. Why are you not having to consistently meet certain performance goals? Not just within your team. Obviously, your team is going to have that for you. But also just as a regulatory kind of situation of, hey, like, you have to meet these benchmarks in order to stay in this sport. It is the pinnacle of motor racing. You shouldn't be able to hang around just because your dad owns a team. Like, no one knows how long Lance Stroll's contract is, because I guarantee you there literally is none. It's probably on his contract. It's like, a contract is for, and there's just like a blank. Like, this is probably written in TBD, because it's literally like, well, it's his son. And he basically bought this team for his son so he could win a world championship. But the problem is his talent is not there. The car is a whole nother subject. But when their car was good, still wasn't showing that talent. And you could argue, yes, in the past, has Lance had some success? Yes. All these drivers have had some success. They've had to get into the sport or be considered for it at least. But when it's kind of this whole, oh, hey, I've been in the sport for 18 plus years and maybe I just don't have it anymore and I'm just hanging around? Or is it my daddy pays for this team, so I'm just here? And those performance benchmarks, I feel like, would help. I feel like it's also fair. It's not, to your point, like, oh, if I turn 45 in the middle of the season and I'm at the top of my game, I have to stop. It's like, no, if you're 45 and you're meeting these benchmarks, then cool, keep going, my friend. And I think that could help with some of this also just interest in the racing as well. I don't know how you feel about that type of thing, Daniela. Instead of measuring by age, is it like a performance benchmark you have to meet to stay within Formula One?
I do agree with this. However, everything isn't black or white, and I think that it's really hard to measure what's true good performance. Like, how can we measure whether a driver is competing to the best of their ability and is deserving to stay? Because it's going to look different for each team. If you were looking at this as a championship where every car was the same, every team had the same amount of money, you could measure that quite easily. But in F1, everyone has different, obviously there's an overall maximum budget, but everyone has different budgets. Everyone has like different cars, different ways that the team operates. There's so many different factors into it. Like, how can you show what is a truly good performance? Because you could have a team, for example, I'm going to use Haas when Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher were there, where their results were kind of on par with each other. So which one would you say was outperforming the other? Like, which one would you say is the more deserving driver? Obviously, it was Mick Schumacher, but we're not going to go there. But like, how do you determine which driver is doing the best? But then, would you then have to swap teams around and be like, okay, well now actually we need to see how Mick Schumacher does in a Red Bull to work out how, like, what his true performance is? Like, I feel like it's not so like easy to just be like, right, it's fully based on performance, because we don't know what, like, truly what that is. And yes, we can see in like, oh, this, I don't know, Lance Stroll is not competing and consistently getting in the top 10, so his performance isn't great. But then you could also have a driver, like, every team looks different. You could have a driver who, Red Bull, for example, and Checo, let's say, for example, you've got Max who's winning the championship, but Checo, who is like, I don't know, consistently getting top fives but isn't getting podiums, they're then saying, well, he's not good enough to be in that seat. So then how do you compare that when then you've got teams at the back of the grid and you've got drivers who are consistently finishing last, but then you're saying that Checo's the one that doesn't deserve a seat? Like, it's so hard to then compare all of these different performances when every team operates very differently and every team's car is very different. I feel like the only true way you could test this, which is actually what W Series used to do in the first season, which is you'd got the drivers to actually swap cars every race. So every driver, to make it fair, would change cars every single race to test this out. That's how they worked out in W Series who actually was the truly, like, the best driver overall, because every time that they couldn't blame the car for their problems, because every driver had to drive that car at some point. They constantly swapped cars.
Could you imagine if that happened in Formula One?
That would be mental, but I would so be down to see that. Like, I feel like that should be like a separate, like, not even like championship, but like a separate thing from F1. Like, where just for a couple races, maybe we shorten the season, the F1 season, and then we have maybe like 3 to 5 races which are just separate, where drivers just swap cars and just see what happens. I'd love that.
Oh my God, I would too. That would be absolutely crazy. Yeah, forget the sprint weekends, guys. We actually want like a string of weekends where all the drivers just like pick a name of a team out of a bowl and that's their team for the weekend. Like, it would be so interesting. But back to your point of like, it's not so black and white. You're totally right. And I feel like that's why you can't really come up with the rule. I mean, we're trying to think through those scenarios here, but none of them really fit perfectly because this sport is just so unique. I was thinking about this earlier while I was doing research for this episode. I was just thinking about, man, there's no other sport like this that the playing field isn't necessarily even. I mean, I guess kind of the sport that you could maybe kind of draw from it and be like, oh, it's kind of similar would be American baseball. Because you have legacy teams like the Yankees, and they've got so much money to spend on players, on facility, on staff. And you have smaller market teams in baseball that don't have the money to go out and get the big guns. They just don't have the cap, to do that, to get those guys. And that's kind of, Formula One is an even playing field. It's like you said, performance-wise, you could have the best driver in the world in a certain car, but if that car is not up to par, you're not going to see their true potential as a driver in that vehicle. So, I mean, I think a great example of this is when George Russell was at Williams. Seeing how he was able to like be at his best in that car, but it wasn't the best he could do because that's only as far as the car could take him, and then you see him at Mercedes now and he's up there on podiums getting wins, and no matter how hard he tried at Williams, that wasn't going to happen for him there.
I feel like you just read my mind, because that's immediately where my mind went to, and I think you've hit the like nail on the head with that one. Everything is so different within this sport that you cannot compare.
Mhm.
George being such a great example of this, but even looking at Carlos, like he went from being at Ferrari, winning races, to then moving to Williams and like struggling to even fight to get into the top 5. And that's not because of his performance. That is because of the team and the car that he's at. And I think it just goes back to the fact that we cannot be black and white about this. But I think it's such an interesting debate that we're having here, and something that I feel like actually isn't spoken enough about, because especially in this day and age, and I sound very old when I say that, but people just resort to hate and trolling and will say, this driver needs to get out, this driver is a pay driver, this driver isn't good enough. But what if we were to say this about Lance Stroll, right? He's at Aston Martin now. What if we were to swap him and Kimi for a second? How well would he perform in that Mercedes that seems to be like the best car on the grid right now? Like
Yeah.
what genuinely would happen?
Yeah.
Same with, I don't know, if we took Ollie and put him in the Ferrari, what could he do? So I think it's interesting that people are very quick to judge, but actually if we were to kind of change the scenarios and change the environments of these drivers, would they actually have better performances or worse performances depending on the switch? And so then how then can we compare their performances and then
Right.
decide that it's their time to leave?
Yeah. And I hate using Daniel Ricciardo as an example again here, but I think the reason that we were able to pretty much definitively say his time has come was because we were able to see that man jump from like 3 different teams in a very short period of time. And the teams and the cars were all very different levels of success, but the result that Daniel Ricciardo was getting was the same. And I think that's why a lot of us were able to say with a lot of certainty, it's time. Like, it's time. Because we saw him hop in a bunch of different cars that were all at different levels and different teams, and the result was the same. I think with, and I hate to say this, and I feel like the Lewis lovers are going to come after me, but I love Lewis too. But I'm feeling like we're kind of seeing this with Lewis Hamilton right now. You know, after he lost that 7th world title, eighth world title, the question wasn't necessarily, well, could he do it again? I think everyone expected him to do it again, and he hasn't. And yes, Mercedes kind of took a dive after that season, and you can argue that that car wasn't great. But he's in this Ferrari, right? Again, not the best car on the grid, but a good car on the grid. And he is still being outperformed by his younger teammate on a pretty consistent basis. So I'm kind of wondering right now, like, is he past his prime? This is what we're seeing here? Um, and this is where I have another question that I was thinking about, really around this whole retirement question, is instead of having, we've talked about, oh, what if there's a rule to keep you from driving if you've gotten too old or aren't performing like you should? Do veteran drivers have a responsibility to step aside and create more opportunities for younger drivers to cycle into the sport? Do you think there's some sort of moral responsibility there that these older drivers have, Daniela?
You're really hitting me with the hard questions today.
I am.
Oh, again, I think it just goes back to like what they're doing in their careers. Like, are they winning world titles? Are they consistently like getting podiums, winning races? Or are they sat down in 20th, 22nd, not really getting anywhere and hogging a seat? I think if they're consistently like at the back of the grid, then yeah, I think it's time to give it up. But if they are, as we kind of mentioned earlier, like, winning world titles and like outperforming their teammates and still absolutely in contention, like to be a world champion, then no. Like, I think you kind of have to be selfish. And if you know that you're almost in your prime, I don't know if you could be at your prime at like 40, but maybe you can. Like, should you then just should you stay? And I think you should if you're still giving everything to the sport and you're getting what you want out of it, then I think you should stay. If you're giving everything to the sport and you're not, then I think that's your time to go. And it's a hard decision to make, right? I can sit
Yeah.
here and say all of this. A, I'm not a racing driver. B, I'm way far off my career to be thinking about retirement. So I can't really talk much on this, but I think if I, like, that's what I think about. I think you could apply that to kind of like any career that you have, right? If you're giving your all to this and you're not getting it back and you're thinking, right, I've been doing this for 40 years, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, you're probably going to think about leaving. But if you're still putting all this effort in and you're getting everything you want out of it and your life feels very fulfilled, you might want to stay. But
Yeah.
also, I think a question we need to think about is like, this is all these drivers have ever known. They gave up their entire childhood to be able to be Formula One drivers. They don't really know what their life looks like outside of this. And this is something that I actually think about on a daily basis. I don't fully know what my life looks like outside of motorsport. And in the environment that I work in, it's contract to contract. I never know when I'm going to be out of a job. I could be, by the end of the Formula E season, out of a job. I might not get a job this time. I might not be in a job this time next year, right? These are things I have to think about. And I sit there and I go, I don't know what my life looks like when I'm not working in this environment. And I've only been doing this for 2.5 years. These drivers have been doing this their entire lives, pretty much from the age of 6 to now we're looking at drivers in their mid-40s. So, like, they genuinely don't know what life is like for them outside of this. So stepping away from that is such a big deal. Like, are they going to find true happiness when this has been true happiness for them for the last, like, almost 40 years? It's such a hard thing to have to worry about and know whether or not, if you step back, are you going to regret it? Like, that's something that I think about. If I was to step away from motorsport right now, would I regret that? And they're probably thinking the same thing, because it's like, it's easier to continue to say yes than it is to be like, actually, no, I'm gonna end my career here now. Because what if you take that step away and then you think, oh my God, I wish I hadn't have left. Like, I probably had more to give, or I had it in me, or I was happier when I was racing. And some drivers know when their time is up and know they want to focus on their family, or they know it's not giving them what they want. But some drivers might not know that then ready to give it up, or that it is the time to give it up. And I think that goes back to the point we made earlier about Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah. My answer to this question is kind of like not a black and white answer. I don't think drivers have the responsibility to anyone to kind of I have the responsibility that when I get old, I step aside and let the younger ones come in. I don't think that's necessarily a responsibility they have. I think they have more a responsibility to themselves, to understand kind of their mental state and also be able to look at kind of what their career is looking like and evaluate if this is, the right time or not. That responsibility, in my personal opinion, is only to themselves. And, you can very clearly see it in some drivers who just don't have that, I don't want to say responsibility, but maybe fear. They don't have that awareness. There we go. That's a word I'm looking for. They don't have the awareness around them as to be able to really sit down and ask hard questions and to be honest with themselves. Fernando Alonso, to me, is a perfect example of this. What is he really gaining from being at Aston Martin these past 3 years besides a paycheck? What is he really gaining? He's miserable. He's not having an enjoyable race anytime he's out there. Right now, he's barely racing at all as it is because the car doesn't even work. So to me, I sit here and I look at a guy like that, and what I see is somebody scared of his future, especially when he left Formula One years ago and then came back. I think of also Michael Schumacher did this very same thing. Someone who's scared to let go of Formula One and being Alonso, the race car driver, and not just Fernando Alonso. I don't think he lacks the self-awareness around kind of where he's at, and the self-awareness of, you know what? Maybe it's time. Because like I said, what's he really gaining from being at that team right now besides migraines and possible semi-heart attacks and losing feeling of hands? There's no positives right now. I mean, and he's made enough money. He's Fernando Alonso, two-time world champion. The man has enough money. It's not a question of, oh, well, he needs to support his family. And I know he just had a kid, and I'm sure that's in the back of his mind, but the man has made enough money in his life that money definitely isn't a question on the table as to why he's not letting go. So I don't know. I mean, obviously he's the oldest one on the grid. Lewis Hamilton's being the second oldest on the grid. So those two are obviously, everyone's like, retirement, question mark for both of you. But yeah, Fernando Alonso, I kind of can justify why Lewis is still at it right now, to be honest with you. Kind of that redemption story I think he's seeking. Where Alonso, I'm just like, bro, what, like, do you even go here? Like, who are you? Why are you here, dude?
Yeah, like Alonso's last championship was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
where Lewis's wasn't that long ago. What,
Right.
5 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Six years ago? What year are we in? 2026? 6 years ago? Like, 20 years versus 6? Like, I feel like Lewis is still allowed to kind of be looking for that redemption. Alonso, I think time is up. Like, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
And I could be completely wrong here, but I have a tiny little feeling that he's not going to win the championship this year.
Really?
So make that 21.
Just a tiny feeling? Yeah, honestly, it's just, it's an interesting question to be like, is there a moral responsibility there to step aside and like make sure, you know, look at the broader picture and say, is it time, even though you might not want to leave? You know, is that a question? Is that something people think? That's up to everyone's interpretation. Obviously, you and I have given our feelings on that. But also just kind of talking about this whole retirement thing, it kind of made me take a look back in F1 history, honestly, because I was like, you know what? Fernando Alonso is holding the record right now for the longest running Formula One driver ever. The man has just been at it for forever. Just to give you some stats here, he's the longest standing F1 driver with over 430 Grand Prix entries as of today. The two sitting under him, obviously Lewis Hamilton, he hasn't retired yet, but we have Kimi Räikkönen underneath him with 19 seasons, 2 decades of racing under his belt, and then Rubens Barrichello with 19 seasons as well. Obviously, Michael Schumacher also had 19 seasons, but we will never know if that would have been more. But yeah, it's crazy. Alonso's obviously won 2 world championships, which is, to me, a great accomplishment, but maybe not to him. Maybe he wants more. And he's 44 years old as of today. So he's the oldest on the grid, and he made his F1 debut all the way back in 2001. Some of the drivers on the grid today were not even born. Like, think about that. That's crazy. And his last win, like we said, was in 2013. But looking even farther back into F1 history, I started to ask myself the question, okay, like, who was the oldest ever to drive a Formula One car? And interesting enough, the oldest driver to start a Formula One race was Louis Chiron at 55 years old, 55 years, 292 days old, to be really, really specific. And that was all the way back in 1955. And then I was doing some more digging and I was like, I wonder how long, looking back at F1 history, how long drivers have stayed in the sport. And obviously, as the sport has progressed, it's modernized, that time frame of drivers being on the grid has been longer and longer and longer. Obviously, why we're here is still talking about this retirement question. But just historically, from 1915 to 1993, drivers' history in Formula One, as it goes, like how many seasons they stayed in Formula One, was relatively short, especially in the early seasons of Formula One. There were for the first season of F1 in 1950, there were only 7 Grand Prix. And you look at, we have 24 Grand Prix now, obviously 22 this year, TBD if we'll have 2 more replacing the other ones. But that's kind of crazy to see that actually more races have been added and drivers have stayed in the sport longer as that's gone on. Even though way back in the day in the 1950s and the early 90s, driving the car was actually more physically taxing. There were less races, but it was more physically taxing. You didn't have power steering. You didn't have the fancy electronics, obviously. You had to shift with your hand instead of paddle shifting. You had to use a pedal clutch instead of a clutch. It was just so much more physically taxing. But what I found just mind-blowing to me, Daniela, and we talked about this just on a personal note before we recorded, was in the first season of Formula One, 15 drivers died in the first season of Formula One. 15 drivers in 7 races. That is insane. Like, what? And then from F1 from 1915 to 1933, it was a total of 46 drivers that lost their lives in F1 cars. That is crazy. So when you kind of look back and you're like, well, they only had 7 races. Why were drivers not staying in the sport longer? Well, one, it was kind of like a game of luck. You were like, well, I've survived this long. Maybe I should quit while I'm ahead so I stay alive. And 2, it just was like if you did continue, you were probably going to die. So we would never get to know if you would be able to continue because you basically be killed off by the sport. How insane is that, Daniela, to think about?
It's mind-blowing. Like, when you told me this earlier, I just was in a little bit of shock because I didn't know this, that 15 drivers died in the first season. And then you said it kind of went to like 12 drivers and it kind of like whittled its way down.
Yes.
But it actually blows my mind that a championship started, 15 people died who were racing. That's not even including spectators, right?
Yeah.
And then they decide, you know what? Let's do it again next year. Like, that's crazy to me. I'm sorry that maybe that's like the Gen Z in me, but like I am mind blown that like this just carried on. Like, who thought, okay, like, you know what? We lost 15 people this year, but next year we might only lose 13. So let's give it another go. What?
Like, what? Yeah, like, think about that. Like, people were okay with it. Like, they like fans, spectators were like, oh, no big deal. See you next year. Like,
did we look at death like differently back then than we do now? Like, obviously I know that things have gone a lot safer, but like, did people generally not care that people died and people lost their lives for this sport? Like, was that just something that people were just like, oh well? Because no, not oh well. Okay?
Yeah.
People lost their lives to make this sport happen.
Yeah.
And that blows my mind. It's just a sport. Like, people just drive their little cars like around a little track, but they lost their lives, and we all thought this was a good idea to continue. Now, obviously, part of me is quite grateful that we did continue because, well, we wouldn't be talking about it. We wouldn't have this podcast right now. We wouldn't be talking about it. But at the same time, I'm like, I can't get over the fact that 15 people died and then they continued to do it for another year.
And not just that, like, the deaths continued from 1950 to 1933. 46 people died in the sport. That's over 2 full grids today. Could you imagine sitting there as a fan for a season and watching over half of the grid die throughout the whole season? Like, that's what happened. And I think you're right. The perspective on death back then was probably different. It definitely was more frequent. I would say, like, you had more people dying from diseases and war, and, you know, like, death was probably a little bit more of normal life, and not so much as it is today, obviously. But yeah, I just, like, when I read that stat, I triple checked it because I was like, this can't be true. But you're right. Like, it's crazy and mind-boggling that not just the first season they were like, okay, we'll give it another shot next season. It's crazy that they had a next season, like, that they went on and continued to plan and had another season of Formula One. But that people and race car drivers and saw that and were like, yeah, I want to do that. Like, you're really talking about some people that maybe lost their bananas. Like, you had to be a tinge crazy to even try this. And that's why I think it's hard to, like, compare the past of F1, even just in general, comparing F1's past to now is very difficult because so much has changed, including the success rate of people living through an entire season. But it just blew my mind, and something that didn't cross my mind really when I thought, oh yeah, you know, like, it wasn't that they didn't want to continue in the sport and have like this long career. It's they died, so we would never know. Or, oh, if you're watching, a little happy bubbles just showed up. We are not happy about death here on this podcast. It's one, they either died and couldn't continue their racing career because they were dead, or two, they just physically couldn't do it because it was so physically demanding, or three, they were like, I'm not going to push my luck here. Had a good 2 seasons. I'm still alive, so that's a bonus. And I think I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, while my luck is good. It's just crazy to think that that was literally the reason people retired, because they wanted to live. Like, what? Nowadays, drivers are just like still driving just because Daddy Warbucks is paying the bill, or if you're Fernando Alonso, you just can't let go. And back then they were like, no, I need to stop so I'm alive. I think I'm going to do that. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. But also crazy that there was somebody who drove a Formula One car that was 55 years old and ended up on the podium in that race, by the way, in Monaco, at 55 years old. That's pretty amazing. So can you be an old race car driver? Yes. And still produce good racing? I think for me, the answer is yes. Daniela, what do you say?
Yes. And I think the fact that a 55-year-old driver in 1955 scored a podium at the age of 55 in Monaco, I think proves that you can still be a driver in your 40s, 50s and still put in a good performance. But
Yeah.
we still have not really answered the question of when should drivers retire. And I don't think we ever will, because it's subjective. And that's, I think, the whole point of this episode is we cannot determine when a driver is going to retire. And for the most part, they have to make that decision on their own, unless another reason, for example, injury or losing a seat, gives them that, like, makes that choice for them.
Yeah. All right. To finish off this retirement / past your prime discussion, Danielle, I'm going to need you to put yourself in the team principal seat. You are Toto Wolff, and you have an open seat at your team coming up. Who are you going to pick? A 38-year-old former F1 champion with over 300 race starts, or a new rookie coming straight out of Formula 2? Who are you going to pick?
Can I ask a question?
Sure. A question for a question.
Question for a question. When was the last time that this driver won a world championship?
Let's say it was within the past 5 years. This is a fictional human being.
This is fictional, yeah.
Fictional.
I know, but I'm really having to consider this.
Yeah,
because,
I mean,
like I said earlier, I was like, Alonso last won a championship 20 years ago, but Lewis won a championship 6 years ago. This is so hard because, like, I'm really conflicted because I love rookies, and I'm like, get a rookie. Like, this is your time to choose a rookie. But then also at the same time, I'm like, but I can rely on a driver who's doing well. And if they're consistently, like, doing well, like, there's so much, like, lack of context here, because could this driver for the last 3 seasons been at the back of the grid, scored no points, but with a good team? Could this, I'm an overthinker if you can't tell, but could they have also been consistently winning races? So, like, if they're consistently winning races, obviously I'm going to choose the I think you said 38-year-old, the 38-year-old driver. But then if this driver is not doing very well and is constantly at the back of the grid, then I want to give a rookie a chance. I want to see what they're capable of. Also, like, think about Red Bull, Max Verstappen. Everyone was like, Max Verstappen's going to be, like, the next best thing. And then he was. Like, what if that is this rookie? Like, I know who this rookie is. So, I can't answer because I'm overthinking it too much.
I feel like this question sums up this entire conversation so perfectly. Is the context matters. Like, it really, really does. Like you said, like, is this somebody who's been on the grid for forever and is scoring points? And how long was the championship? Or is this rookie? Like, did they win F2 or were they in the middle pack? Like, what's going on? And, like, where's the team at? Is the team midfield, upfield? Like, are we a brand new team? Like, this just sums it up so well. Nothing is black and white when it comes
Yeah.
to Formula One, even when it comes to the end of your
Mhm.
Formula One career. It is not black and white. It is not oh, this and this and this, that means you're done.
Mhm.
It is
Okay,
just
I
not.
have one final thing.
Okay.
If this driver won F2 and was a woman, easily I'm going to choose that as the option.
Wow, say your bias without saying your bias.
And that is all I'm going to say before I get cancelled. So, yeah, I would, if they paved the way, they've deserved to be there. They've gotten there because they've worked hard. They've not just gotten there because of merit. Then
Right.
I'd choose the rookie, I think.
Yeah.
Because you never know, like when a driver switches teams that they have been at for a long time of their career and have won championships at, that they're like Lewis. Like, I don't know, and this is probably quite controversial. If I was Ferrari, I don't know if I would have chosen Lewis or if I would have chosen a rookie. Because with Lewis, yes, he like is one of the most decorated, or is the most decorated driver of all time. But at the same time, he's been at Mercedes for such a long time. Bring him into Ferrari, he doesn't know the team. He doesn't know, like, we don't really know how he works. He doesn't know how we work. Where if you bring in someone fresh, like, they're more adaptable than a driver, like, than the most decorated driver. So that's why
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of leaning towards a rookie. But yeah. So I'm gonna, to answer your question, because I feel like I didn't answer it properly. And we're gonna move past what I did actually say. I'm gonna say I'm gonna choose a rookie.
Got it. Got it. I am going to say I would do the same. I would choose a rookie because I think the upside potential for a rookie is more risky, but higher reward. I think taking that chance is worth the risk. Where if you, yes, have you take a driver that has prior success, doesn't mean they're always going to have success in the future. And also knowing that they're toward the tail end of their career, probably, it's not going to last forever, that eventually this person is going to leave, maybe in the next couple of years. So looking at like building a brand around this person and building a team around this person, maybe, I'd rather go with the rookie because you can do more there with that, and build together more than you could with somebody who is kind of, on their way out eventually, especially if they're like 38 years old. I mean, we haven't seen anybody, what we say, Alonso's 44 right now. Like historically, you haven't seen anybody be an F1 past age 44. So you got to think about, well, that gives me, a handful of years with them if they stay that long. So that's why I would pick a rookie.
Okay, I have one final question for you before we wrap this up.
All right.
Cadillac, they chose to go with Valtteri Bottas and Checo Perez, both relatively older drivers. It was obviously a new team. Would you have done the same thing as them? Or would you have maybe thought to have brought in a rookie and had maybe one older driver and one younger driver? Or maybe both rookies?
Yes. I think what Cadillac did was the right move. Because of the situation that they're in. Again, context matters. Context matters for everything in life, honestly. I've learned that in therapy. But I think Cadillac made the right move there. They need experienced drivers in both of those cars because they're at the very baby beginning stages. They don't have room for risk. They really, really don't. So they needed to get two drivers in those cars that are very experienced, not just with success on the grid, but also experience of being at teams that have built. I mean, Bottas is at Mercedes, building Mercedes. Obviously, Checo Perez was with Force India when they were building as well. Not so much with Red Bull, obviously, but with some other teams. So they had that experience with what it took to build a car and build a team. And that's what Cadillac needs right now. Maybe in a couple of years when they're a little bit more solid and grounded and feel a little bit more confident in their ability as a team, they can take on that risk of bringing in a rookie. But right now they need the experience on the track, on the mic, sitting together working with the engineers. They don't have the time or the risk space to like get a rookie and then have to teach them when their own team of engineers, some of them are learning for the first time as well. So Bottas and Perez are playing this role of teacher a bit too to the entire team of like, no, like this is how we do it. Not like this. So yes, 100%. I think Cadillac did the right thing there. Well, we have loved to see a rookie. Of course, everyone wants to see a new rookie, but I think we've been spoiled the past 2 years with how many rookies have kind of come into F1. So I'm okay with Cadillac not doing that. And from a team and business wise, I think it was very smart. So yeah, that's my answer to that one. I actually had something to base that off of. In your defense, Danielle, I gave you 2 very fictional F1 drivers with no context at all. But, well, you guys, thank you so much again for joining us for this episode. We had so much fun discussing this whole is Lewis Hamilton retiring / when is it time for F1 drivers to hang up the helmet? It's such a topic I think that comes up a lot, and Daniela, like you mentioned, is not talked about enough, but is obviously brought up a lot. So we really enjoyed taking a deep dive into F1's driver history and also just the big old gray question of when's the time to retire. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, if you did, give it a thumbs up on YouTube or make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. We really enjoy putting these together for you. As I mentioned, we're also over on YouTube. So if you like to watch your podcast, you can check us out over there. And we're also on Instagram and TikTok at the Fastlane Collective. So check us out over there. We'd love to talk to you, and make sure to rate the podcast as well. We'd love to hear your feedback. So we will see you next time, you guys, in the fast lane. Bye-bye.
Hello, fly chick coming through. Nice to meet you. Glad you came too.